No, no vimos nada. No sabéis. ¿Ya puedo arrancar? Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, dependiendo del lugar en donde nos estén viendo y escuchando en este momento. Mi nombre es Jorge González, soy profesor asociado de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de los Andes y editor general de la revista Latin American Law Review, la revista latinoamericana de Derecho, que hoy estamos muy contentos de presentar un nuevo número que se trata sobre derecho y política del derecho de la competencia en Iberoamérica y yo creo que incluso más allá, hoy lo estaremos discutiendo un poco. La idea era como tener un mapa interesante sobre qué ha pasado con los últimos desarrollos de política y derecho de la competencia en nuestra región y pues estamos muy contentos de presentar este número. Voy en este momento a cambiar la presentación a nuestro idioma inglés, que vamos a hacer la presentación y nuestra conversación en inglés. Entonces voy a hacer ese cambio en este momento. So, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to specially thanks my team at Universidad de los Andes for pulling off this wonderful issue of Latin American Law Review, especially Andrea Aguirre, who has been behind the scenes and behind the curtains and making this work. So thank you very much, Andrea, for this and for your work in Latin American Law Review. In this issue of Latin American Law Review, we were talking about competition law in Latin America and even beyond. And it was an issue that was suggested by Andrés Calderón from Peru and by Juan David Gutiérrez from Colombia, who are the editorial guests for this number. They were also the ones who figured out this number, how everything should work, what were the main topics, and pulled off a very interesting issue in Latin American Law Review. So Andres is going to join us today. Andres was the guest editor of this issue. Thank you very much, Andres. I will start just by saying that this was a wonderful challenge. Also, Juan David is joining us today. So I'm going to ask both of you, Andres and Juan David, I mean, what inspired you about doing this number? I know that you've been working for a while in this topic, but one of the things that I really appreciated about this was, on the one hand, how you were figuring out that Latin America should appear here, but also not to become very parochial in the topic, like also to think about, there's something that we can say from here, but it's not about, this is Latin American competition law and politics about competition law. No, this is a dialogue or a conversation that has to be more horizontal, and it's not about reproducing this idea about the exoticism of Latin America, but actually it was something different. And I think that you were able to do this also by connecting Latin American competition law with contemporary challenges that are global. You talked about in your letter to the readers that you were thinking about climate change, you were thinking about gender equality, you were thinking about many transformations. And I will also think that something about democratic governance is also there, and inequality in generally and political economy in general. So you were able to connect all this stuff. So I was going to give you the floor, Andres and Juan David, to start this conversation on how you came to, design and make this call for papers so successful in order to start the conversation also with Carolina Saito and Alba Rivera, who are joining us today as authors of articles in this issue. So Andres and Juan David, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Jorge. Hola a todos. Buenos días, buenas tardes, o buenas noches, depending on where you're connecting from. I'm connecting right now from Santiago, Chile, while I'm Peruvian and I'm a professor at Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. I'm doing a PhD here at Universidad Católica Chile. And I think that the best response to your question, Jorge, is that Juan David Gutierrez is one of the most global competition lawyers and researchers that I've known. So he's, I think, the master behind this the master brain behind this special dossier of of the Latin American Review. And it's also because we co-chair the Latin American chapter of the American Society, or the Academic Society of Competition Law, ASCOLA. And this was one of the projects that we decided to promote since we started this position as co-chairs, to engage and to make try to make that all researchers that were keen on doing some work regarding the new goals of competition law, the new challenges that competition law is facing with regard to new economies, to the new digital economy, and also with regard to new goals that competition law might be addressing, such as climate change, sustainability, food, pluralism, democracy, and many others, privacy as well. We knew that there were a lot of academics doing interesting work on those fields. We wanted to give them the opportunity to share some of their work with the Latin American audience that writes and reads in Latin American Review, and it was a great result. I think that we had so many valuable and very interesting articles that we're going to talk about in a bit, and that we managed to get the attention of very bright scholars, not only working in Latin America, but also working in different countries, as is the case, for instance, with one of our guests today, Alba Rivera, who is coming from Spain, and who has been very kind to join us in spite of the time difference. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit more, a bit before starting the conversation with Carolina Saito and Alba Rivera.
Sure, thank you. I would like to start to welcome everyone and to thank the journal, starting with Jorge as the editor, but also Andrea, who is behind the scenes. It was a joint work. It takes a small village to create this dossier. So it was a wonderful experience. Thank you very much, Latin American Law Review, for believing in Andres and I, and all the people who presented their manuscripts. And thank you, Andres, for your kind words. I think that this is the product of many conversations that Latin American lawyers and economists who are interested in competition law, and even people that are not Latin America, but like Alba, who are interested in the Latin American competition laws and regulations. We've been talking about for years about the possibility of developing new insights from our realities. And it's not just the need of inventing new theories because of this, for the sake of it, but simply because there are some elements in our contexts that are different from those that are discussed in Europe and in North America. So these contributions delve into the political economy of our legislations and how they're enforced, into the sustainability issues and how they interact with other rights, and finally, of course, about the digital transformations that both markets and states in Latin America are undergoing. And there are narratives at the global level that are pertinent for Latin America, but they're not pertinent in a way that we can just copy-paste the discussions, because the copy-paste of the discussions elsewhere lacks context. And I think that what these articles provide is an analysis, not just of the law on the books, but law on practice in our region. And I think that's very important to understand better the challenges And if as many of us academics, or even, for example, as Carolina, that it's not just an academic, but currently part of the agency, if we want to address the challenges, we need to understand the problems and put forward solutions that are pertinent for our own problems. So I'm very, very glad to see this special number, and I hope that many more special numbers come in the future. If Latin American Law Review is willing in some years, not now, of course, we will come back. We will come back with
I thought you
another.
were exhausted, but we're gonna try it.
No. I always want more, but with that, I think that we have two marvelous speakers, Carolina Saito and Alba Rivera, which I've had the pleasure to meet both remotely and in person, and I've seen and read their work, and it's just wonderful that we have them today to represent all the authors, because some papers are co-authored and some papers today don't have someone that present them. We have a short time, and that's why we selected two of the speakers that so that they present insights from their papers, but in the end they are representing a sample of what you will find in the journal. So I absolutely invite everyone to download all the papers. And with that, Jorge, I would like to give you back the mic.
Well, thank you so much, Juan David. Thank you so much, Andres. So I think that one of the things that we want to do today is like to talk with Alba and talk with Carolina about your articles, right? So one of the things that are really interesting, I guess, contemporarily in political economy in general, is the reflections about value chains and markets, and the way in which law is not only a tool to regulate, but also a tool to create markets. And I think that one of the interesting things about your article is that you're thinking about law as this tool to create something, as creating economic spaces in which you distribute resources. So Carolina, I would like to start our conversation with that very general framing of your article. And if you can tell us a little bit about what you and your co-authors were thinking about when you were writing the article, and also what were your theoretical frameworks from which you started?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to thank Andres and Juan David for the invitation and also for the call for paper. It was really amazing to see the results and all the papers that were published there, not only regarding Latin America, but all the discussions that we see around the world there reflected and with a little bit of context. So it was just an amazing work, and also Jorge for orchestrating all of this and helping this to come out. So it was really nice. Going to the paper, first of all, I would just like to say that it was written by some colleagues of mine and myself. So Beatriz Kira, Diogo Coutinho, Luisa Carmandayan, and me. And we also started thinking about the subject because our research group, the Line Public Policy Group from the University of São Paulo, we were contacted by an institute from the Georgetown University, the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law, to do some research regarding the economic law and the right to food, or in food in general, but related to legal aspects. And when we were contacted, we decided to have some parts of the group focusing on regulation, the other part on public policy, and part of the group decided to focus on antitrust. And our idea when we thought, oh, how can we think about these two things together, if they can be together or not, was a little bit challenging. But at the same time, it was really interesting to see and what we have in Brazil, what we could think about it, and try to see the picture and what we could suggest based on the research that is already being done regarding the intersection between competition law and the right to food. So when we thought about that, our first starting point was to think that both of them are in our constitution. So the right to food is a constitutional law, right. And we also have the competition defense as a principle in our constitution. So both of them are part and a really important thing in our country. And our practice in Brazil, when we talk about competition law, sometimes it's much more focused on the economic aspects and all the framework that was brought from the United States or from Europe of how things should be done regarding competition policy. And sometimes we forget that we have this constitutional basis and we should think more broadly about that. And when we thought about that, our idea was to connect also with the big picture that we have mainly under discussion because of digital markets, about the goals of competition law, if we should have a broader view about that, and if we should consider more sustainability or even more fair markets. And I think that when we talk about the right to food, this is super connected because we are in a country that the access to food is not that simple to all the people who live in Brazil, and we have some problems related to that. And so we thought that having this view would be really important to discuss this topic. And for this discussion, we used a little bit of the discussions related to law and political economy. We have a group of researchers that are focused more on that as opposite of law and economics, to have a different lens to see the world or the law. And so we use the lens of the law and political economy in our paper. And mainly we try to see about using the idea of the global value chain, which is super present in the food market, as a starting point to see how the competition authority here in Brazil saw the cases related to food, and if the global value chains or the food value chains were considered or not, and how we should think about for future analysis if we should take in consideration some aspects related to the global value chain. Because when we talk about food, the production, the distribution, and some other layers of this value chain, they are acting on what happens in one of these layers. So we try to see if the Brazilian authority was looking at this aspect, and what we discover is that the authority focused on the traditional analysis, mainly based on the neoliberal analysis regarding mergers and also conducts. So one of the aspects that we tried to construct in our paper was to have some different views when we're talking about food. So the first of them is to try to understand all the layers of the food value chain, and not only the relevant market, which is usually how the competition authority sees it. And this doesn't mean that the authority should not focus on what is happening in the relevant market, but that a broader view, a holistic view of the other layers of the chain should be seen and considered to really see the impacts on the relevant market. So I think the first thing that we realize is that the view of the authority is too narrow, and we should have a broader view of what's going on in all the layers of the global value chain. Another thing is that most of the cases and the focus of the authority is usually related to the horizontal competition. So if we have the market really concentrated, or if the companies are more trying to form a cartel, something like that. And based also on the BRICS report, we think that taking a look on the vertical aspect of the competition is really important, not necessarily considering all the layers, which could be a little bit too broad and maybe even impossible for the authority to have so many analysis, but considering what's happening in the other layers and how the competition can be affected. So how the prices are settled, if the other layers impact on this, if the quality, or even if the bargaining power can be compensated somehow. So not only in the relevant market and in horizontal aspects, but taking a broader view of everything that's happening in a vertical aspect of the chain. And also it's important to consider everything, and we think that having the global value chain as the big picture of what's going on, it's important so that we can understand the players and also all the relationship that is going on, and the impacts among the layers. So I think trying to put it in a nutshell, that's what our paper tried to do. And I think it's a little big nutshell, but trying to make it simple, I think that's what we try to do in our paper.
Jorge, if you allow me, I would like to ask one question to Carolina. Carolina, I've attempted to do something very similar that you and your colleagues tried, and it was about putting ourselves in the shoes of other people. Instead of being comfortable in our competition law and policy shoes, try to go and understand other areas of law and other policy problems. And you've studied food value chains and the collective right to food, right? So I was wondering whether your co-authors are experts in these other topics, or how did you reach to other areas of law and to other policy issues, maintaining your antitrust insights?
Thank you very much for this question. It's a little bit challenging. Actually, the four of us, we are more related to competition law. I think that Beatriz and Diogo have a broader background on economic law in general and public policy regulation, but none of us were part of the food discussion. So it was a challenge for us. We really needed help and inputs from the O'Neill Institute, who is really focused on the discussions about food and health law. And we also tried to keep our minds in the competition law and try to see if we could have discussions with other topics. So not only food, in this case it was food, but I think that some of the discussions that we have here are really similar to other topics when we try to discuss some things, maybe not the global value chain, but related to sustainability, this big picture of the law and political economy and the constitutional law. Here in Brazil, at least we think other subjects could be related. So we tried to make it a little bit broader, that we could have other discussions based on at least some of the basis of our paper. But the focus on food law, we had to have a little help from our friends from the O'Neill Institute. And I think we also used a lot the discussions that were presented in the BRICS report, because there was a really nice analysis of the food market in Brazil related to competition law. So it was something really interesting to have this paper, this report already done.
Great, thank you, Carolina. I would like to bring also Andres to the conversation. So Andres, I'm sure you have also more insights and questions as an editor for both Carolina and Alba.
Yes, I'm going to switch a little for a moment to Alba to talk about your article. Probably I'll try to get some small scoops from you. And first, I want to ask you, Alba, about the first part of the title of your piece, which is La senda del efecto Bruselas en la DMA en Latinoamérica, or tracing the DMA's Brussels effect on Latin America. Could you explain to the audience a little bit about the Brussels effect and what were the first traces that you highlight regarding data protection into Latin America?
Thank you, Andres, and also thank you for the invitation to talk today. with all of you, especially with Carolina, which is a pleasure since I don't read Portuguese, so it was quite hard for me to get across the paper. But I really enjoy this sense in the journal that all of these languages can come together. My own paper is in Spanish, but then other papers are in English, and Carolina and her co-author's paper is in Portuguese. In my particular paper, it was built first upon my own research regarding the DMA, and I really saw the first glance of the call for papers actually going back to this idea of in the Ascola newsletter. So I first saw the call for papers there, and I tried to trace back my research to the effects that it could have worldwide, and one of those regions that could be affected could be Latin America. And the article is designed around my initial intuition relating to the European Union's grip and its motion in setting the global standards for regulation. And we have seen this, for example, in, as you said, with data protection and privacy regulations. And also how that standard setting motion could be influenced by this concept that Anu Bradford coined as the Brussels effect a couple of years ago, to designate this grip that the European Union has on how regulation advances in other corners of the world. In this sense, she also has this idea that it's not that Brussels is really important, but that the motion could also go that there is a Washington effect or even a Beijing effect. But the fact is that the Union tends to heighten the thresholds and the standards of regulation, so that pushes other jurisdictions on that same motion. In her own work, Bradford did document that the different sectors that were considered under union regulation were not affected by this extraterritorial effects, if you want, in the same manner. So, for example, you have one of the sectors that she analyzes is the food sector also, and there you have, I believe, I did not quite read extensively on that, but I think that there's quite a tight grip on that, whereas in other sides of the regulation, the influence is not so strict and so stringent. So I wanted to test out whether the DMA could be in that side really influencing and setting out the extraterritorial, if you want, standard of digital regulation in particular in Latin America. And for that, first I set out the paper basically in two parts. The first part was analyzing the implications that the EU's directive in 1995 and later the GDPR had on Latin American data protection regimes, and building up on those conclusions, then I went on to consider whether those extraterritorial effects and those same characteristics could hold true in the context of the DMA. In a nutshell also, and maybe a smaller nutshell, I point towards the problems that extraterritoriality may cause when applying the DMA in Latin America in two main poles of attraction, if you want. One on the side of the designation from the subjective perspective, because there's a set of designated operators that have been designated as gatekeepers. We can talk about that later. And they will have de facto an effect on how they will operate within Latin America. And then the other pole of attraction, the other point of contention would be about how the DMA might affect enforcement and competition enforcement directly because of the obligations that it imposes.
Thank you, Alba. And regarding that prospective view that you pose about what may be the repercussions of the approval and entry into force of the DMA in Europe that could spill over Latin America and as well as other jurisdictions. Do you feel that it may come to have some unintended consequences, such as some scholars have already assessed regarding the data protection regulations, specifically regarding the possible lessening of the competition effect coming from the GDPR? Do you feel that that could also be something that other jurisdictions that did not take part of the bigger DMA conversation should be worried about?
Yes, I would say there's two sides to that question, actually, because there's first this answer I could give you that we do not quite know what intended and unintended consequences of the DMA might mean. I have actually written recently about what the objectives of the meta objectives of the DMA might mean: contestability and fairness. Maybe fairness, we might have a clearer view what that might mean, but then contestability is quite hard to factor out in the midst of regulation that is intended to harmonize the internal market. And then I would say that we can also respond to the question in the sense of getting to the nitty-gritty of the content of the DMA. And on that sense, against the background of the extraterritorial effects of EU data protection regulation, I set out in the paper 3 main areas of influence which may be deemed the most complex in asserting this Brussels effect, and whether it will apply within the DMA, and whether in the end it will be welfare enhancing for Latin American users, because there's also a question there. First of all, the DMA is a regulatory instrument aimed at imposing obligations at particular economic operators, and those obligations apply as a consequence of a designation, and that designation operates because those operators surpass certain thresholds, qualitative and quantitative thresholds. And now, as of the 5th, actually the 6th, where the 6th of September, the designation decisions were issued. By the 5th, the Commission did issue the decisions officially. And the 6 gatekeepers were designated: Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, ByteDance, Microsoft, and Meta. And within those operations of those economic operators, we might see that that designation might not hold exactly true in the Latin American jurisdiction, because they might not hold the same power in the Latin American area. For example, I also researched recently, Apple does not have such a strong power as opposed to, for example, Samsung, which holds a tight grip on the market of mobile operating systems. And actually, Samsung was completely excluded from designation. So there might be adopting the words of the DMA and unleveling of the playing field in that sense. Furthermore, and also securing the compliance and the monitoring of the compliance of the obligations in the DMA is also key to ensuring that those obligations apply uniformly and coherently. And only the European Commission is the sole enforcer of the DMA. No other competition authority may intervene in that sense, and of course, not the Latin American competition authorities are completely drawn away from those powers. So I also see like quite an overlap in the sense of, first of all, that the Latin American competition authorities will continue applying competition law, and those obligations may overlap with the obligations set out in the DMA, so that maybe what I maybe predict is that the gatekeepers might apply their business models as a different at a different standard, depending on the territory that they operate in. That did not happen in the past, but now maybe the DMA will do more to fragment than to harmonize at a global level. And I also said in a previous paper, there's no obligation binding the Latin American competition authorities to hold true the conclusions that the European Commission issues in enforcing the DMA. So they are free in that sense to in that sense establish a higher standard or a lower standard or the same standard as the DMA, or even there's a third possibility, that is the sense, and this Carolina will know well about, that other jurisdictions within Latin America adopt this sense and this motion of copycat law in the sense of adopting their own regulatory regimes, copying and maybe borrowing Juan David's words as a copy-paste into the jurisdictions based on the DMA's obligations. So there is quite a lot there to consider, I would say.
I would like to jump in, Jorge and Andres, if you allow me. Alba, I was super interested in your paper when I read it for the first time, because as some of you may know, I have a particular interest in the Artificial Intelligence Act that is being discussed currently in the EU. And for me, the DMA and perhaps the DSA as well are the closest to what we will have in the future with an Artificial Intelligence Act, where through regulatory means you aim at curbing big tech. And as you let's say, not predict, but foresee what could happen in Latin America with the DMA, something similar may happen with the Artificial Intelligence Act. So I was wondering if, I know that that your PhD thesis is about the DMA and you're very focused on it, but have you thought about the implications, the potential implications of the approval of the AI Act, and whether it will have a future Brussels effect with regards to Latin America?
I have analyzed the AI Act, but in a different context, in a different light, from a constitutional rights perspective. So I have some idea, but I had not considered it in this sense. I would say, first of all, that it's also based on the same legal basis as the DMA, so 114, which for me it's a real problem, because the DMA tackles and introduces all sorts of problems because of that legal basis. So I would say it's also a matter of how, first of all, the European Commission and the officials tend and enforce the regulation. But it's also a matter, and this is up to discussion, because now I think the AI Act is in the midst of the trilogue negotiations. It also boils down to the fact of the content of the AI Act. And for example, in the DMA is, I would say, different to the DSA, because it's a different animal, I would coin it, because it translates competition into regulation, and it also translates the fines imposed in competition to regulation, but without the procedural rights that we would have in a sanctioning proceeding. So I would say that would not apply directly to the AI Act, so might have more to do. And also the AI Act and AI in particular is more of a, I would say, nascent area in terms of the regulation that it bears within the broader union policies. So not in the sense of it was not handled, but in a hard law sense. So I would say it might, in that sense, increase more the protective thresholds of worldwide users more than maybe the DMA will do.
Jorge?
Wonderful. Yeah, I wanted to jump in. It's a very broad question, perhaps for both. Because in the call for papers, one of the things that really attracted me of what Andres and Juan David had designed was the talk about politics and law and politics, however you want to frame it. And listening to both of you, it's very interesting to see how the field of competition law, antitrust law is in nature an interdisciplinary field where economics is always playing there, but also politics and economics are playing there. So I would like to ask you very broadly how this thinking or reflection about politics and law permeated both your article and permeates both also your work in general in these topics about if it's digital markets, if it's global value chains. How is that playing out in your ways of framing your approaches to these topics, actually?
If you want to go first, Carolina. Okay. my work. So first of all, I would say that in the sense of regulating digital markets, it has become a really political topic, aside from a lively topic, because we have on one side this idea of protectionism and EU protectionism, and that the union cannot come up with any big tech of its own, so it has to attack the American, the US companies to, in that sense, undermine their competitiveness in the global market. So that would be like in the background of the discussion and how I tried to capture that movement. Indeed, the designation decisions seem to point that way, insofar as there are 6 gatekeepers and 5 are US and 1 is Chinese. Also, we have this idea that the FTC is also being quite attacked, or US senators are not convinced with the FTC's actions in also cooperating with the European Commission in tending to enforcement of the DMA. So there's also this sense that multilateral cooperation might not apply. And also there's this sense also in the political and maybe more societal sense that the gatekeepers are imposing the regulatory power in a private manner. So they dictate all of these rules, and now they are dictating rules. For example, if you take the example of threats, it was maybe in Latin America, and you can confirm that it was launched worldwide in July, but it was not launched in the EEA. So there's this sense that also on one side politics plays a hard role, I would say, but then also there's this counterbalancing power of market power in this sense, as far as competition and digital regulation is concerned.
So in our paper, I believe this aspect is not that the discussion is not that hot as in Alba's paper, but I think that we can see the political aspect mainly related to how we frame the relationship between the two constitutional rights, and also how the authorities should maybe see the right to food differently from the current tools that it uses. So this means that when we say that the authorities should focus on broader goals and also be more active in constructing a more fair and more sustainable market, it's a little bit related to politics and the discussions of how to frame the competition law, if it's only the tools that we have that are more economical, or if we're going to see as more active in other goals and other political aspects that could be used and also seen by the authorities. So I think that the right to food is a little bit of what could be extra than currently the authorities do. So I think that's more our frame in the article related to this topic.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Andres and Juan David, if you want to close our conversation today. So yeah, feel free.
No, from my side, I just wanted to ask a very brief question to Alba and Carolina, because I have nothing else to add. So I just want to ask you if you could give the audience a little bit of advice on future topics of research that may be connected to some of the areas that you're currently working on, so we can inspire other researchers on their own work, and also thinking in the next special dossier that Juan David already predicted on these topics.
So this time I can start. I think one of the $1 million or $1 billion question that we have when we talk about trying to connect competition law with the law and political economy view and a more broader activity from the antitrust authority, I think we still don't have really concrete ways of how to do it. We discuss a lot that we should, and that we should consider, and that other things should be considered, but in the day-to-day, it's really difficult to say the competition authority should have a guideline to analyze a merger in this way. I know that we have this discussion in the US a little bit, but in the end, will it work, and how to do it exactly? I think it's something that we have a great field of discussion and things to do in our competition law community.
On that same note, I would say that the matter and the research on goals of competition will always be there. So always on the competition authority's plate. I had a brief period of working and researching for the Spanish Competition Authority, and also I have this sense that Carolina touched upon, that okay, yes, we should focus on the broader sustainability, food, I don't know what, but then you have to get to the, I'm thinking about the butchers' interests or the farmers' interests, so that you have to apply in a certain case, and you spend like months on that case. So I think that the matter of from an academic perspective, I would say that more work, even if it overburdens some of us, because goals have been largely explored, but pushing the limits of if you want, the outer boundaries of antitrust is always top on the list.
And I absolutely agree that pushing the boundaries is tough, but I think it makes it interesting. I'm the kind of scholar that likes researching not just on what the law says, the case law says, but going beyond. And I enjoy it very much. Our papers in our special edition, because they all strived to think beyond antitrust law, but keeping, of course, the main interest on understanding how competition law interacts with economics, politics, other interests. So again, thank you very much to all the authors that sent their manuscripts, to the people who reviewed the papers that were accepted, those that were unfortunately not accepted, but maybe in a future edition, as we said, you'll have a better chance if you keep on working on them. And again, Jorge and Andrea, thank you very much for organizing this event, and in general for your editorial work. Excellent.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.